Welcome to today's social system mapping on-ramp session for September 13th, 2021. Your hosts today are me, Christine Capra, and Kara Martiners, our producer and tech support person. And for those of you who are new or not used to our routine, we have three monthly sessions. Today, the first Monday of every month, we have a sense-making session where we use HSD, human systems dynamics, methods, and models to dig deeper into social system maps once they're up and running. So they're a way of getting more value from your map or learning how to do that. The second Monday of the month, we have an OnRamp, which is an introductory session sharing. We usually have somebody in our community share one of their social system maps. And today, Louise Clark is going to share two interesting COVID maps around COVID responses with us. And then on the third Monday, we have deep dive conversations. September 20th, the topic is going to be when we are creating networks and using social system mapping, what are the paradigms that we're trying to shift? So looking at what are the actual, we talk about paradigm shifts all the time, but what are we really talking about? So we're going to do that with Sarah Shanahan of the RAMP network. And for those of you who are familiar with our schedule, we are no longer doing the tech talks on Fridays. I'm repurposing that, so I'm not announcing it today. So that's why that's missing. So there's lots of places to learn more, and Kara will is probably putting links to those in the chat right now. If you're antsy to dig in, you can click on those links, but she will also follow up, send you a follow-up email within the next 48 hours that will have a recording of this session and all of these links as well. So if you're not in a big hurry, you could just not worry about those right now and wait for them to come in an email. Also, she'll also have links of previous sessions. And if you want to talk to me, I'm available every Thursday on my Zoom call from 4 to 4:30 p.m. So you can get the link from our Slack channel. And sometimes I cancel, so I also will announce that in Slack. Okay. So that was me whipping through the first stuff because most of you know it. But for those of you who don't, I hope I didn't go too fast. So so today's agenda is we'll do some chat intros in just a minute. We will go through the maps after that, and then we'll have question and answers. There'll be plenty of time for question and answers. And for those of you who are new, how we do this is the formal session goes from to the top of the hour, but we always stick around for an extra half hour for open-ended conversation and more informal questions and answers. So if you want to stick around for the extra half hour, you're welcome to, but if you need to jump off, that is absolutely fine. And we'll stop and say goodbye. Okay. Slow down, Christine. Sorry. I get sped up sometimes. Okay, so let's just see who's here today. If you could put into the chat your name, your pronoun, and where you are. I'm gonna stop sharing. Yes, I was in my head, I was trying to think, okay, wait, where's Kent and where's Brighton? They might be close.
Hello, Kent. And
Hi, there's Sussex.
Okay, and then let's okay, the next one is just tell us at least one primary network that you're a part of or that you're working with, or that you have some affinity for. Okay, Carolyn, we'll look forward to seeing you another time. And sorry about the kids, and I hope they feel better soon. Take care. Co-housing. Cool. And then once you're done with that, what brings you here today? Just a question you're holding or a desire you have relative to this session. Go ahead. Nice, Angela. Thanks for that. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And for those of you who are new, just a quick overview of what we, when we're talking about social system mapping, this is how we generate a social system map, which is the thing you're going to, what Louise will be sharing with you and interacting with is in a platform called Kumu, which is an online interactive graph network platform. You can have a free account and make as many publicly viewable maps as you want, or you can have private accounts. And most of our clients have private accounts, but that is for displaying and visualizing and filtering a data set that consists of nodes and lines. But to get at the kind of data that Louise is going to share with you today, you need to basically crowdsource that data from a bunch of people. And that happens in SumApp for these maps that Louise is going to share with you. SumApp is a data gathering tool that my business partner, spouse, and I created for precisely this purpose, which asks individuals both some stuff about themselves as well as about their relationships. So SumApp gathers the data. We gather the data in SumApp. It's all customizable. You can set up your survey and your connection questions however you want. The data then is live streamed or fed into the Kumu platform. And then we take an embed link from the Kumu platform and can put that back into SumApp. So your network members can just give their responses in SumApp, and then they can actually see the map in the same platform. So they have a single platform experience, but as a map builder, you're working in two platforms. Just like to make that clear because it can be confusing to people when they just see one platform. Okay. So introducing Louise Clark, who is monitoring, evaluation, and learning manager at the Institute of Development Studies in the UK. And I'm not very good at introducing people, so I'm just going to say she's been really lovely to work with to the degree that we do when we have little questions and problem solving. It's always fun, and she makes some very interesting maps. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Louise and stop talking and stop my screen share.
So I'm going to share with you an experience of how we've applied SumApp. So I work for the Institute of Development Studies in the UK. For those of you that don't know the international development sector or the UK, we sit within the University of Sussex. We're sort of a bit of a hybrid organization. We operate as a think tank. We do sort of higher education research, so masters and PhD students, but we don't teach at the undergraduate level. And we do a lot of sort of development research, which has a very strong policy focus. So essentially, we're trying to understand global development challenges and do research to develop solutions. And that's across a very broad area of subjects, from gender to governance to climate to livelihoods and agriculture. And my role as monitoring, evaluation, and learning manager, I get to jump into a little bit of all of that. And when we talk about sort of the research to policy interface, one of the things that we look at over and over again as part of how you bring research to policymakers is through networks, and that is really what's brought me to SumApp and working with the team. And I'm just going to share two examples of projects that we have that have come to IDS in the last 18 months linked to COVID response. So obviously everyone knows about COVID. So a lot of our existing research, the term here was pivoted. So nobody could get into the field. COVID just sort of swept across everything. Our researchers haven't been on a plane for a couple of years. It's changed the face of research probably forever in our sector. But it's also created new funding opportunities. So I'm just going to do a brief project introduction. So the first project that I'm going to talk about is funded by the FCDO, which is the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office here in the UK, our equivalent of USAID for those of you in the US. And this is a project, this is a really interesting project. So in this, the FCDO have, they've funded IDS. We've got several £million, and we are sort of operating as a research manager for the government. So this project has grown dramatically since the maps that I'm going to share with you have been produced, but we've currently got 56 projects, 28 partners, and 34 countries. So it's quite so very, very broad, very, very global initiative. So the two images you can see on the screen, one is from the website, which I've shared the link with you if you're interested to find out more about this project and the types of research that we're doing. And essentially we're working with Southern research partners who are based all around the world, largely Africa, Asia, Middle East. We've got, I think we've now got partners in Afghanistan and Yemen, and just a recent push to sort of the Far East as well. And I'll talk a little bit about that and the implications for data management and security. And the map you see at the bottom was a map that was done by a colleague of mine using Kumu, and just an example for people who are new of how we use Kumu also as a systems mapping. So I haven't anonymized this one because the writing is far too small for anyone feasibly to read. So it's anonymous by blur. And those large blue dots are the sort of the core partners. And then the smaller dots around the edges are their southern partners. But PowerPoint's sort of distorted that one. But this idea of this, so that's the organizational network. And what you see there is actually it's very much a hub and spoke model. You've got these sort of northern-based research institutions working with their southern partners, but it's all quite disparate and disconnected. And what we wanted to do with the SumApp exercise was to really understand the connections, not between the organizations and the projects, but between the researchers as individuals, to look at where we could join the dots between these research initiatives and look. So I think there are sort of thematic issues, so governance and humanitarian response. I can't remember the others off the top of my head. You have to forgive me. I work across about 15 projects at the moment, so I forget some of the details. But essentially, we've got this very broad network, and how we, part of our thinking in terms of how research influences policy is, how you can create networks that connect not just researchers to policy people, but researchers to other researchers. So we can look at some of the sort of common policy messages that are coming out across this sort of broader initiative, this collective. What is the value of the collective here? And the second project, and there you can see my colleagues sort of partner mapping, organizational mapping slightly more clearly, is for IDRC, the International Development Research Center based in Canada, where we play a quite different role. In that role, we're not the research manager, we're the knowledge translation support. And so our role in that project is to work directly with these 21 projects, so it's actually quite a lot smaller, but still across 42 countries. So as sort of huge global reach. And what we're doing is trying to identify opportunities to connect these Southern researchers to give them a voice on the global stage. So again, thinking, you know, a research project in Tanzania and a research project in Peru, but what are the similar messages? What, you know, if we connect them together and possibly bringing in some messages from Bangladesh and some messages from Mexico, actually all of a sudden we've got quite an interesting offer on the global stage that could capture sort of global decision makers' attention. So that's what we're trying to do. So that's the end of my PowerPointy bit, and now I'm going to move to okay, so I'm going to come back, and as Christine mentioned, I've got 4 tabs open. I've got the 2 network maps, and I've got the SumUp backend, so I can show you how I how I generated this data, and then this is the sort of entry point that SumUp creates, which is, it's just fantastic. I'm such a big fan of SumUp. It's such a slick tool, and essentially what we do is we program the sort of the back end, and then we send every single participant gets sent a unique link which takes them to a page that looks like this, and they have the sort of a bio. It takes them to the survey questions. It takes them to the survey questions are sort of the questions about themselves. So it enables us to look at sort of attributes of different groups, where their geography is. You know, one of the things we're really interested in is the different organizational interactions. So then the connections, and then this point that Christine made about the map. So then the map in Kumu actually feeds back, so people can see it updating in live time, which is really very, very cool indeed. So, and this is the front page for the IDRC, so everything had to be done in English and French, and there's our very sort of the data ethics, the GDPR sign off, which I'll come back to. I'll come back to, and maybe we can talk about that in the question session. Sorry, this is why I need my water. And getting the ethics to sign this off, because, you know, one of the things with network data is it's really very, very visual. And let me just see my, sorry, my, let's see, sorry, my Zoom controls are blocking my, just one moment. I'm going to go to that page. My Zoom controls are blocking my my tabs. Anyway, so I'm going to start with the COVID Collective. So again, this was early. This was a presentation I did back in November, and I'm about to repeat it because the network's grown, but we've also done quite a lot of activity to try and, you know, build these connections across the projects. So this is quite early days.
Louise, can
Yep.
I just want those of you who've heard of just know she's using the presentation mode of Kumu. She's made a presentation in Kumu and is marching through the presentation rather than just the direct map in Kumu. So this is a good example of that.
Yeah, and it's, again, I find that super useful when I'm working through. One of the things with Kumu, I have a real love-hate. I love SumApp, I love-hate Kumu. And it's sort of so slick that it's just annoying sometimes. It's like the cool kid that you're like, oh, that's too cool, but I just don't need that. I don't need that much. But the presentation mode is very, very useful, and how I use that is one of the things is creating lots of different views in Kumu. So once I get my SumUp data, and this first vision is everything. It's all the data, all the connections from all the questions in one, and it's this sort of hairball mess. And then I go through and I'm like, well, what does, you know, then I want to look at some of the patterns, and essentially so this was 2 questions that I asked people. The first question was how you know this person, and I'll show you the sort of how I graded that. in the SumUp, in the sort of the back end. And then how would, is this someone that you'd like to connect to? So looking for potential sources of collaboration. So this first view is everything. I'm just going to move you all over there so I can move my arrow along. And so you can see I did have people's pictures, because this was also a very early stage in the network. So we presented this back to people, and it was really nice for people to sort of see their picture and see, it was a really nice way of introducing people to each other. So it wasn't just like we were studying the network, we're actually sort of actively using it to engage with the network in network building, in theory. So then we sort of broke it down into.
So wait, Ben, yeah.
You just said there were people's pictures, but I don't see pictures. Should we
Yeah,
do-
I've had to anonymize the data because of my data ethics. So just you can see that they've got, that's why they've only got the little rims rather than I've colored the dots.
Right.
So it's just in the settings of Kumu. Sorry if that wasn't clear. So yeah, I've taken out all the names and pictures, just because one of the things for my organization to get the sign off to do that was that I would not make this data publicly available. With, I've asked people for data for internal project purposes, but I can't share that with you. So apologies for that.
Yeah. So can I just interject one more thing? Just so for those of you who've not seen a map like this created with SumApp, what she means by pictures is that you can ask people to upload a picture of themselves in SumApp, and then each circle would have either a picture of a person or a picture of an organization's logo or something like that. So it's got a lot more visual interest, and then people can start to recognize each other, even just looking at the map. So I just wanted to.
And it gives you a nice sidebar. So it also becomes a reference point of, so we're trying to build these connections between researchers. So this is now actually a resource of going, oh, researcher project X, I spoke with them, and especially now in this world where we're all on little boxes on the screen, how you then sort of remember people and come back. If this hadn't have been a COVID project, it had been a COVID project before COVID, we would have, for something completely different, we would have all gone on a plane, gone to a big meeting, met each other, had a final dinner in the bar, and then you'd go away and you'd remember who everyone was. We've got these sort of hour-and-a-half webinar moments to try and build these international connections. So this was just a really handy tool to show that this actually, when we're talking about networks, we're talking really about people. And that's one of the things I really like about this is it's organizational, but it's putting the faces behind the organizational names. So when we did this, and so that we started off looking at organizational clusters. So obviously those reds, that's the IDS team. We all work together. That's another team. That one, I think, there's always you have to sort of double check the data. Someone that I think that's sort of either someone who's worked, they've either misunderstood the question or they work on a project together beyond this one. So they consider themselves as part of the same team. But you can see that it's quite loose. And then we looked at sort of people who are regularly in touch. So you're starting to see those organizational links connect. This was very early in the project, and we're about to repeat this. So we'd hope to see these guys that are around the edge now collected to the main network structure, and not just, you can see that there's the core communication people that are holding the network together. So I'm not going to hover too much because I don't want to open the personal profiles, but there are some core people who connect these different network structures, and it's really useful for us to know who those people are, and also who these people are, and who are the people that we need to actively reach out to and engage with to bring them in to the network. So then we did a sort of, who are you aware of? These are researchers, and researchers work on reputation. So part of the value of being a collective is that, you get to work with, it's like, oh, I've read their papers, or, oh, I've heard their name, but I've never actually met them. So, again, you can see that that there is an awareness of people working across different organizations, different fields, and also these sort of looser ties. I think something else to be aware of when you look at this data is you can't see, or you actually, if you look very, very closely, there are arrows. So, you know, these people, this person here looks very connected, but maybe they've just filled in the survey and named lots of people. It's when you start getting the people that double connect. So you can see this link, these people know each other and they've connected with each other, is a much stronger, that's a real sort of endorsement of the strength of that relationship. So you're also looking at the bidirectional ties and who, you know, who has responded, and people learn quite quickly to manipulate this data and name lots of people, because then they look really central, and you have to sort of find ways to work with that, or just, you know, really to be aware of it. And I'm sure now we repeat it, we'll get a lot more ticking. So there was this idea of awareness, and then the next few slides are just you know, who do you want to work with? Now we're in this collective. This was sort of helped. The idea was to help to inform our design. It hasn't, you know, it hasn't followed through as much as I would have liked, mostly due to my time limitation to really dig down into the data and say, right, look, there's these potential connections. But, you know, that was what we had hoped to do, but the reason we didn't do it was more of a sort of time limitation, and that the data wasn't useful. As I say, we work across a lot of different things, and there's sort of very fast pace, and right, we've done that, everyone liked it, move on to the next. And then just, yeah, again, looking at sort of interest to coordinate on policy engagement, and, you know, who are potential people that, rather than just take your individual research and try and sort of knock on those policy doors and look for those policy windows, who could we work as a collective to do this in a collective way, both in terms of national governments, but also those sort of multilateral international spaces. I think. Yeah, and then just the sort of knowledge sharing and building capacity, so more the process. So, you know, so again, it was like breaking down, when we talk about a collective and the value of a collective, those are the different types of added value of the collective. You know, we can do our policy engagement together, but we can also share knowledge and methods, communicate different areas of our expertise, and then just sort of connect and look across the research. So that's one. The IDRC one, the questions I asked, I did these both at quite a similar stage. This was 3rd of February, the last one was in November, so that's not too far apart. So the questions I asked were quite similar, but as you can see already, the structure was quite different. So already we had, you know, this is the same first hairball of everyone, all the connections that came out through the SumUp, and I'll show you the back end. And again, these people around here, they were people that are included in the survey, but nobody named them, and they obviously didn't respond to the survey either. But that's okay. You can't, you know, you can. Kumu will allow you to make those people invisible, but actually it was interesting for us to see how many people in the network remain disconnected. And we hope that when we come to do this, these are both quite rapid projects, so they're 18 months, which is pretty fast, even for the development world, where we say, you know, we get funding to change the world in 3 year tranches at a time. But because of COVID, and, you know, everyone, but back when these projects were funded, everyone thought we'd have forgotten about COVID by now, but sadly that's not the case. But, you know, there's the sort of real urgency of getting these policy messages out there. So that's the overall network. And what was interesting, and I've just been on several calls with IDRC this afternoon, that their decision in terms of how they were going to respond to COVID was to look for partners that they'd worked with previously and say, right, you know, these are some of the emerging research questions we're seeing around COVID, and what, you know, what can you do? How can you help us answer these questions? So and that sort of much stronger cohesive network represents that these are partners that have worked together, and they've worked with IDRC in the past. And then they brought in IDS, my organization, to really help sort of facilitate and grow those connections. And this network mapping exercise was a part of that. I've clicked too quickly on that one. So these are people, oh no, that's back to the original slide. So these are the people that work together. Again, you can see the different institutional groupings. And then these are the previous collaborations. And if I remember, so we were sort of interested to look at, so the blue ones are people that have collaborated on previous IDRC funded programs. And the red ones are just people that have collaborated in the past, which are probably the majority. And I can't, I think we're more interested in the structure, but you know, that was also interesting. It's about understanding the network and these research, you know, the usual suspects, people in the sector tend to know each other, but we're trying to again build on those relationships. So understanding that is really useful for us. And also to be able to show how we've contributed to that, which is part of our own learning. So these are people who were already collaborating on core. We did it at a slightly later point in the process. I think I've taken out the isolates for that one. And then this look at the potential connections. So research methods, and we sort of have a bit of a those of us who work in sort of knowledge and policy, that the researchers love talking about methods, and we're talking about methods, but you know, so there's a lot of like, we really just want to get together and talk about our research, and we're like, we really need you to talk to the policymakers and give us the practical, not the sort of really dive down into the intricacies of the methodology, but you know, what is the so what question that we're like trying to pull out the whole time. The policy engagement again, so you can see that this is a much richer network in terms of connecting across. I've just heard this person in the middle, this blue IDRC, has literally in the meeting previous to now has just announced she's moving on. So what that's going to do to the network remains to be seen. But again, you sort of see that you know, you can start to understand some of those roles, the key role that person plays in sort of bringing those networks together. Whereas you've got, you know, around the edges where you've got some of these organizations who are intermixing. There's some really rich interconnections there, and things for us to build on. Again, these guys up here, how can we draw them down? How can we connect them to this broader network structure? Working on civil society voice, which was a key sort of aim of the program. Sort of slightly less people slightly less sure of that. And then I think the last one was knowledge sharing, which these were all sort of quite strong knowledge management organizations. So that's a field in which they are strong. And I'm just going to show you quickly, I'm going to go to there. This is the IDRC survey. As you can see, it's in French. So that was how I structured my questions. There's quite a lot of different templates. So you've got a template for your survey questions, template to set out this front page. But this is the real key, is getting those questions right, making them simple, and then it's making them just easy for people to answer. So that, I think, is. Are there any, and then I can just, if I just go back to the bio here. So then I send everyone gets this sort of welcome to the survey. You can see they've got their connections up the top, the survey, so that you can add a picture down here. So that's the picture that, oh, sorry, I've gone a bit quickly then. this is actually my page. So you've got a picture there. That's the picture that then SumUp will take and add to the map. The survey. So this is where we just have some straightforward questions. And this information was really great that we had then in the side panel of SumUp. So you've got almost like you can click on a person in the map and see their bio, as it were. So we really like that function. I'm going to just quickly connect on the connections page because this isn't anonymous, but you can see, so you get these sort of panels of people, and then you click on, I can't click on myself, I'll click on Luca very quickly, and then I tick of how I know him, and that saves, and then that adds into the map, which shows where we're at in terms of so that then links back to the map, to the maps that you've just seen. So I hope that's useful. I think I've probably talked up to my and so just sort of leaving space for questions, really.
Thank you, Louise. That's great.
Should I stop sharing?
Sure. You might want to keep it open in case that helps answer a question, but you could stop sharing until you need it.
Okay.
So I'll start with the questions in the chat, but feel free to either add more or just voice the questions into the space. But so Brian mentioned there's two approaches seem to focus on different phases. Is there any consideration of joining the phases? Not necessarily these particular two, but perhaps ones related to each other. And Brian, maybe I should have just had you answer. I'm sorry.
No problem. Basically, what I'm thinking is that you've got two different maps there. Okay, so two different groups of people who are commonly related on some common purpose. Okay, and that common purpose is taking place in time. I mean, it's a specific time frame that we're using. And they're creating new knowledge among themselves. They're creating new information and new knowledge. And that new knowledge is either going to be completely insular and they're just off by themselves doing their own little thing and the rest of the world doesn't have to worry about them, or that information that's going to be put out into the world. And it looked to me like the information from the first group could be used by the information by the second group. But if there is not a viable way of getting that information over, if there's delays and so forth, you could be losing a lot of valuable purpose. And that both are kind of like pragmatic on the ground application. They're teaching doctors who are actually going out on the streets and doing whatever they are with their patients. This is the way you should be doing things. And that information has to get all the way down to the doctors in order to be effective. And I'm just wondering, is there any kind of phasing that we could look at to think about that?
Okay,
does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm losing the audio a bit, so I'm going to jump in and
go ahead.
I mean, yes. Shouldn't all public research be connected? Yes. Shouldn't it all be a global public good? Yes. Is it? No. So these are, I mean, they're two separate projects. They're both the similarities that they're working on COVID. We are in conversation with both FCDO and IDRC and how we can create those connections. And make sure that that knowledge is treated as a global public good. I mean, essentially, that's part of our role is to get the research out and to get the research out fast because we're in a time of COVID and we can't wait for the sort of the academic system and the papers. We need policy solutions and we need them right now, and the academic papers need to wait. And that's more of an issue, with Southern researchers, they a lot of them, they are used to working in that much more dynamic context. But I mean, I think this is, it's social science research, so it's very much around sort of understanding systems, understanding, you know, the impact. So that, you know, we've got projects that are looking at the impact of COVID on livelihoods and markets, you know, how it's affected in the informal economy. I mean, some of the stories that are coming out it's heartbreaking. It really is. You know, we think we've had COVID tough in the north, but so yeah, I mean, I think the bigger issue for us is really understanding how these networks have changed in time. But yeah, we're currently we are talking to both donors. You know, one of our added value is the chance to sort of facilitate those connections and those learning between them, but that's sort of a separate and quite political conversation.
You also mentioned about potential connections. Do you have a way of seeking out potential connections that really isn't intensive hands-on?
I mean, essentially, this is you know, all of those dots and that map, and specifically when you look at the organizational level, have their own networks,
Right.
and that's one of the things that we're really trying to join up. Because we're working through partners, I'm not close enough to it to do the network mapping at that level, and it's quite challenging. But I'm, you know, and essentially a lot of the engagement that we're doing is online, which is, you know, on the one hand, when COVID hit, was all of a sudden we were running these meetings and they're all online. So on the one hand, they were open to everyone. Whereas before you had to get on a plane, you had to get your boss to sign off that you were going to be at the office for a week, you had to get a visa and a jab, and, you know, all of these sort of things that you know, to get to this meeting, all of a sudden it's an hour and a half, you can do it on Zoom in your lunch hour. And there's sort of, so there's this huge inclusion effect. But you know, that actually signing up to the minister's assistant over coffee to figure out what was on the minister's agenda next week and how we could potentially get a brief to him, that's all, you know, that's off the table. So, you know, also part of this is understanding that shift. So I'm desperately trying to track, well, who's coming to these webinars? How can you influence policy through a webinar? But that's a whole other, you know, I'm doing that for both of these projects as well. But I think, you know, one of the things with SumUp is what it does, you know, and network analysis in general, is use it for what it does well. Don't try and use it to do everything, because you very quickly get lost.
Thanks.
Also, that you are depending upon people engaging with you as well as you engaging with them.
Yeah, and there's you know, there's only so much you can do. But...
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Other questions from anyone who hasn't? Jim or Angela? Angela, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I don't understand enough about it, but if you were sending out this survey and invitations to different people, let's say, for example, it's our co-housing groups and stuff, does it just appear on the map when they've actually completed it, or does it show that, like, you've identified somebody there but they haven't actually completed it yet? Do you know what I mean? Or are there different views that maybe show, you know, this one hasn't completed it yet, what's the potential could be if everyone completed it? And it obviously wouldn't have all the connections in it at that point, but it would still be visible that it's not completed, a completed picture.
Yeah, that I really struggled with that, and that took me sort of quite a few days. And I don't actually, it's a while ago, I can't remember what we came to, because when you you have your list of people that you send the survey, and so the map option on the bio is optional, so you cannot have that. It's a nice, you know, it's relatively new. When I started working with Christine and Jim, they didn't have that functionality, and they've added it, and it's great, because, and I'm looking at Jim's question of how do you keep people motivated to map themselves, as well, they can see it. But the point that you raise is, you know, so I had all these sort of, do you consent to appearing in the map? And we decided to say you have to opt out rather than opt in. And these were, you know, because and we grapple with power relationships in our sector all the time, that we've included you in this map, and if you don't answer, you're still there. So the dots are all dotted around. I don't. It's a tricky one. It's a really tricky one, and I grappled with it. I grappled with it for a while, but we decided, I think, to leave the people, those nodes in. I think I played around with some code that people would only be added once they've responded, but it was quite complex. Probably Jim could help you with that, but that's more technical than I could deal with. And I'm just looking at Jim's comment about 50 to 100 people with 5 or 6 questions. How have you kept them motivated to map themselves and do it multiple times? Well, that's a good question. We've only done it once so far. We're about to go into the second round. So, and that, that is also another issue. So we're about to repeat for the COVID Collective. So for some of those partners, it will be the first time that they've contributed. For others, it's been over 6 months. So actually, we're hoping that survey fatigue, which we're very aware of in my sector, won't apply. For IDRC partner, we've decided actually we're bombarding them with too much other stuff. Now is not a good time, and we'll come back to it at a more appropriate time. But I think so the COVID Collective, and I was telling with Christine, so we now have partners in Afghanistan, and so obviously with the situation there, that understanding, that question that you've asked, Angela, about the sensitivity of those researchers' names appearing in that map, it's that this is the reality that we're dealing with, and it's been a really sort of stark reminder that this isn't theoretical, that sort of we're working in conflict and violence affected states, and that visibility of those organizations, you've got huge responsibility there. That's why the partners that I've shared are not so much in that, but I anonymized everything. I can't share that data. So even when I presented it back to the group, it's all password protected. But essentially, we've sort of asked people to opt out if they want to.
Thank you.
Angela, part of your question had to do with, can you see on the map easily if they haven't responded? And yes, you can do this. So you can put them on the map, and also just by running the metrics to see who has 0 out degree, then there's various ways you could do it by who hasn't responded to anything. But yeah, there's ways of seeing that visually on the map.
So on a map like that, you might have the people that are connected showing the connections between them, and the people who haven't responded would kind of sit around, sort of almost grayed out around the edge with no connection to anything because they haven't connected themselves. You'll
have that, but you'll also have people who maybe haven't responded, but other people have connected to them. So, but you can, you just have to know what you're doing. But yes, you can make it so that you can see, even if people have been connected to, if they haven't done anything, you could color them a different way, or you could filter on them. There's ways of seeing that.
Yeah. Or not display them at all if that's what you want. It's very good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I obviously need that little bit of code then, because I did grapple with that.
Yeah, well, we can talk about yeah,
and well, I mean, that's the other great thing I think about Kumu and SumApp. So when I started doing this, so when you go into the Kumu interface, the SumApp feeds directly into the Kumu, but then to sort of manipulate the data and look at the different patterns, you have to go and color the elements and look at the different connections, and then you can flip it and you get this code, which is incredibly intimidating to a non-techie person, and I speak as one. And but actually I worked with a girl who she cracked it, and she made me look at it, and actually, like, my messages, don't be intimidated by it. And there are these really nice little, so for example, today Cara sent me, just put this little bit of code in, and it just took all the names and the pictures away and are completely in one. You know, I didn't have to fiddle around and go backwards and forwards. So my message is don't be intimidated by the code, because it's scary when you first look at it. And I even figured out some code for myself on one of the last maps I did. I was like, if I do that and then that, and it worked. So
And you can, if you get stuck, there's our Slack. We have, like, my husband, Tim Hansen, will do, he's like our Kumu master, and he can pretty much help you figure out anything. So if you get stuck anywhere, just put a question in Slack, and Tim will give you the bit of code, and you can plunk it in, and then you'll be happy. So yeah, there's a lot of support.
Wow, sounds brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm
Other
afraid I'm
questions?
gonna have to go. I've got to go to co-host an event at 5. So thanks ever so much.
Thanks for joining us. Bye, Angela. Does
Bye.
anybody else have questions? Joe, well, Jim, go ahead.
Well, is any other the newbies have questions? I'll sit behind them. But if not, so it seems like your theory of change with the folks in both these groups was just let each other be known to each other, and that would be motivating for them to come to the map and use the map. And I just wanted to check, was that the main thought, that if people could just know each other, know what their connections were, that would be motivating to as a useful tool?
No, it was more of a, I mean, from that perspective, it's more of a baseline. So, you know, our intention is to repeat it and show the value added. So, you know, so we now work. So as part of it was us to get to know the network, because we're players within it as well. And, you know, we didn't know many of these organizations in the past. So we've got to build those relationships, build that trust as much as, you know, they do with each other. But for both groups, I mean, they run very much in parallel. They're actually from the inside, they're actually quite different projects, but from the outside, they look quite similar, and the websites are quite similar. And, you know, so we have, both of them have like a quarterly communication, engagement and learning group, which bring, you know, the comms people together for a sort of informal, what are you up to? So we're just sort of constantly looking, we look across the research portfolios and develop, you know, where are there sort of common themes emerging. So with the IDRC projects, we did a big piece of work around the recent UN Food Summit, or I think it's actually happening this week, but there was a sort of public, you know, like a dialogue that went in. So we worked to bring these projects together. So we're actively working to promote and build these connections. So part of the activity now, we're going to go and repeat with the FCDO, the COVID Collective, which is a much bigger network that has grown. So part of it is to see how the network has grown. Part of it is to see, you know, how the strength of the network has grown. And, you know, we will never be able to, you know, I'm the evaluation learning person. We'll never be able to say, like, that's all happened because of us. But what we all say, if there are no new connections, that's because we haven't done our job. But if we have done our job and the network looks much more strong and much more cohesive, that's a very strong argument for us, to our funder, to continue to fund us and these programs. But essentially, the theory of change is that we're really interested in sort of building bodies of knowledge. So, you know, one research project to one policy maker, it's actually the strength of this collective voice of bringing in different experiences from different contexts, but with similar messages, that's much, much harder for policymakers to ignore, and sort of elevates those, you know, those Southern voices into the global arena, which is one of our key objectives.
So will you then shift the relationship question at some point to test that? Like, have you gotten information that's moved your research forward?
Jim, can I just do
Please.
sorry.
Please.
Louise, are you sticking around for the extra half hour?
I can do a little bit. I've got yeah, I can stay for probably half of that if that's okay.
That's great. So let's do this. Is there anybody who needs to jump off at the top of the hour who has any last thing they'd like to say or question for Louise before you jump off?
No, just saying thank you, Louise. I'm here. Just not ready
Nice
for
to
the
meet
video
you.
yet. I very intrigued by how the map showed up, and thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Well, yeah, I think you've
ahead.
you've got my contact details, so feel free to reach out with any follow-up questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let's do so top of the hour, we all unmute and we give our goodbye greetings for the day to everybody who's jumping off, and then we pause a minute and let them jump off, and then we go back to our questions. So let's do that now. Unmute, 2, 1. Bye, love you all.
Bye.
Gratitude. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.